I'm Andy Agathangelo. I'm the founder of a campaign organization called the Transparency Task Force. We are a UK-based certified social enterprise, which basically means we do good rather than focus on trying to make a profit. We're an organization with a very strong purpose. Our formal mission statement is to promote ongoing reform of the financial sector so that it serves society better. And we do the work that we do through bringing together two different types of people. On one hand, people who have a sense of passion and purpose for the change that we want to see. And on the other hand, those who have the power and the position to make change possible. I'm pleased to say that over the last 9.5 years or so since I started the Transparency Task Force, we've had a few successes along the way, and we're becoming increasingly well known, and I'd like to think increasingly effective. Most of you here tonight don't actually know the Transparency Task Force at all, so I'll just go on to elaborate a little bit more about what we do, how we work, and that kind of thing. Perhaps one of the most important things that we do is we run an all-party parliamentary group. I'm going to try and share my screen to talk to you about the all-party parliamentary group. So this is it here. You should now be seeing a web page with the members of this all-party parliamentary group. As the name suggests, it's what you get if you encourage a group of parliamentarians to work together. It's the all-party parliamentary group on investment, fraud, and fairer financial services. I'll scroll down while I'm chatting. We helped set this all-party parliamentary group up about 3 years ago because we learnt that if you want to try to protect people from scams and financial crime and fraud and all these kind of things, you really do need the support of people in Parliament, whether they're people in the House of Commons or in the House of Lords. So that realization was the impetus behind creating this all-party parliamentary group. It's a big APPG. It's growing, and it's pretty effective. Like all party parliamentary groups, it has what we call a purpose statement. And I'm going to show you what the purpose statement is because it will help you understand why we are interested in the McClure's Solicitors situation. Here's the purpose statement. I'll make it a bit bigger in case you can't quite read it. It says, to advocate for the victims of financial misconduct, crimes, scandals, frauds, and regulatory failures by driving positive, progressive, and purposeful reforms that achieve a fair, trusted, and just system where the service providers, regulators, and government agencies provide appropriate protection and deliver good outcomes, including redress for historical wrongs. Most of the work that we do, both in the all-party parliamentary group and in the Transparency Task Force itself, most of that work revolves around various kinds of investment scams, frauds, scandals of that kind. The McClure solicitor situation is a little bit on the periphery around what we do, but it's still very relevant. It's still very relevant because people have ended up, as you all know, having their homes wrapped up in trust that they find it difficult to get out of, and that kind of thing. And if we can help, great. If we can't help, at least we took the time and trouble to try to find out. The background to this particular meeting is that we were approached by Annette Riding, who's going to be the key kind of speaker tonight. She's done a wonderful job, an absolutely wonderful job, bringing people together, helping me understand a little bit about the McClure situation, helping me to understand how people have been suffering. A lot of what Annette told me going back a few months kind of rang very familiar to me, because for the last 1.5 years or so, the all-party parliamentary group that I've just been speaking about has been challenging the Financial Conduct Authority and building societies involved with the Phillips Trust Corporation scandal. There's about 2,500 people who have really suffered, and typically elderly, vulnerable people who have suffered as a direct consequence of being introduced by building societies to will writing firms and trust creating firms. And unfortunately, there have been all kinds of complications with the wills and the trusts. You'll identify with the kind of issues that they've had. And the All Party Parliamentary Group has been working very hard to try to challenge the Financial Conduct Authority to properly investigate and take action against the building societies. It's been really tough. It's been really, really tough. It's been quite successful, perhaps partly because of all the media exposure that there's been. Um, I think that I'm right in saying that of the four biggest building societies involved, they've now agreed to pay back 100% of the money that was invested by the victims into the schemes. So there's been real progress. We're not quite there yet. People aren't in the position they would have been had they not been referred by the building societies in the first place. But we'd like to think that our involvement with the Phillips Trust victims has been quite successful so far. I'd also like to very simply mention that the approach that we have tends to be very inclusive wherever possible, tends to be quite team orientated. We encourage people to work together in a peaceful way, in a harmonious way. Sometimes we come across victims of a particular campaign or a particular scam where things are a little bit touchy, things are a bit, high friction. And I know from the experience I've had in the last couple of weeks, there's some really strong feelings amongst the victims of McClure solicitors. And frankly, sometimes those strong feelings get in the way of making good progress because it just becomes a big distraction. Trying to sort out wars between people isn't really the real way forward. What you want is a community of like-minded people who are working together to make a difference. So just being very open and honest and transparent about it. I always find myself working with people who are able to work collaboratively with others. And for whatever reason, if somebody's not a team player or is unable to work in a controlled and civilized manner, it just disincentivizes me to want to get involved. I personally have found working with Annette and a few of her colleagues over the last few months to be absolutely fine. No problems at all. Very honest, transparent dialogue, very healthy interaction. It's been a good experience. It really has been a good experience for me anyway. Okay. Tonight's objective is really just to try to respond to, I guess, two key questions here. One is, what is it that's supposed to happen when a law firm goes under? And what's the difference between what's supposed to happen and what's actually happened in the McClure solicitors space? The impression I get, ladies and gentlemen, is that there's quite a big difference between the two. And I'm extremely grateful to everybody involved who's going to be speaking tonight. Some of the speakers are individuals who are going to be telling their story from a victim's perspective. Others, like Annette Riding herself, are going to be talking about things from a campaigning perspective, so on and so forth. But let's try to bring all the voices together. Let's try to have a harmonious, constructive conversation. Please, everyone, just obey the very simple rule. Let's treat each other as we'd like to be treated ourselves. And let's make the most of the time we've got together over the next hour and a half or so. My colleague Alexander, do we have Kate Osborne with us? If not, we'll go straight to Annette. I don't think we've got Kate here, do we?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Kate had originally planned
Oh,
on joining the meeting, but is unable to due to votes. We had hoped they'd be later on in the evening, but they've
yeah,
been pushed up, so she's not able to join. I know she spoke to Annette about just doing a brief sort of overview of what she's done so.
yeah.
And I've got those notes in front of me, so I'm happy to take over from that.
Would you really be? Would you really be? That's really lovely. Can we give our first round of applause, people, to Amanda, who's going to be stepping in at very short notice to say a few words on behalf of her colleague, Kate Osborne MP. Amanda, please do just dive in. Can we just show our appreciation to Amanda? We're very grateful to that, folks. Amanda,
Yeah, of
over
course.
to you to share with us whatever you'd like to. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, I want to say that obviously, first off, I think this is something that Kate is very, very on it with. We spoke to Annette initially back in May,
Uh-huh.
with our constituent Ken Gemma as well, who spoke about his sort of impact and his experience of this situation and the scandal. And I think that's when we first sort of were aware of it, and where I think more pressingly that there's so many people that don't know they've been impacted. And obviously it's great to get the support out, but if we don't know who specifically has been impacted and how we can reach them, that is also extremely concerning. So as I
Yeah,
said, in May this year, we met with Ken and Annette and we sort of discussed this. We spoke to the BBC as well. Um, and we had a really good article come from that, trying to raise awareness on this as well. So then following on from that meeting, we wrote to the then government, warning them that if there was no action, then we would see a scandal similar to that of the Horizon post office scandal.
absolutely.
Um, in May as well, we put forward an EDM. There were 9 signatures, 2 of which were from the SNP. We had hoped for more, as I'm sure you'll all know. It was quite a turbulent time back in May, but we're definitely looking to continue that on. I know we had agreed also to look at setting up a debate with Emma Lawbuck, who's the South Shields MP,
Yeah,
and we're obviously trying to get on our feet a bit after the election because we had hoped to do that before the election, but we're still picking this up where we can. As soon as we were back in office, one of the first things we did was write to the new Secretary of State for the Justice following the election. And we've urged a meeting between her and Annette as well to try and sort of explain in as much as possible we can that this is a very urgent situation. It has to be dealt with now. I mean, these are lives being impacted as we go along. It's not just something that's going to affect us down the line. We very much have to address this now. And essentially, we were told that they were unable to respond at this current moment in time due to ongoing reviews. We were given a holding response, which I have shared with Annette, and we're hoping to get something back, and we will be pushing them if we don't hear anything back soon. So that's kind of what Kate has done on her parliamentary side. And a lot of what I'd like to get from this today, hearing from everyone else's experiences, is looking at what other paths we can take and where we can raise other people's voices as well. So that's our overview.
Amanda, that's really great. Thank you ever so much for being here, and
No
thank you for
worries.
covering Kate in such an effective way. So much of finding the solution to the problem is about getting the right people around the table. I'm absolutely convinced about that, Amanda. And having, parliamentarians like Kate, and there's others here tonight. We've got an MSP with us tonight, which is great. And please do so chip in at any point if you'd like to. Just raise your hand and come in at any stage if you'd like to do that, Stuart. We've got Stuart McMillan here, folks, tonight. Can we show appreciation to Stuart as well? Everyone's so busy. So when parliamentarians and people involved in politics take time to come and participate in this sort of thing, it's really, really, really appreciated. In fact, on that particular note, just before we go to Annette, I want to share my screen again, if I may, just to show you something, because I've made the point that it's often about getting the right people around the table. So um, I'm just going to talk to you about an event we had in Parliament last week. So there's a bit of press coverage here about what we call the Fraud Summit. We had all kinds of organisations in Parliament last week. The gentleman standing up there, it's quite small, but let me just blow it up a little bit. The gentleman standing up here just to my left, that's Bob Blackman. Bob's become quite high profile as a parliamentarian recently because he's the chap who runs what they call the 1922 committee. He was involved with the selection process, management of the appointment of the Conservative chair. Anyway, this event was a great event. We had about 85, 90 people there, including the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, the National Crime Agency, the Serious Fraud Office, various people from the Police Institute, so on and so forth, all about this great big problem to do with fraud. And I'm just making the point that if you get the right people around the table, then you're halfway there in terms of trying to solve problems. So thank you very much for speaking on behalf of Kate just now. That's really great. Thank you, Stuart, for being here. Let's go straight to Annette, who's going to set the scene a little bit further. And I just want to reiterate what I've said before. I've personally found dealing with Annette and her colleagues just an absolute breeze in the last few months. It's been a real pleasure. It's been very nice to be working with you, Annette. Can we again show appreciation to the speaker who's just spoken, and also to Annette for the words that she's about to say. And thank you, Annette, for bringing everyone together. That's really is half the battle. Thank you, Annette. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And we
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate the time that you've spent with us over the last couple of months. You've made it listened and helped us on our way. So what
You're
I'd like
welcome.
to do is just talk you through a couple of areas. First, I was going to talk to you a little bit about the Facebook. I had hoped that Paul John Hill would be here. He is the person who set up the Facebook page back in 2021 when the announcement came about McClure's going into administration, Jones White taking over. Paul was living in Australia at that time, and his sister was in Canada, and they were impacted by the McClures, and they were just stressed out, didn't know what to do. And so he started the Facebook page, and it's really just grown from there. So 3.5 years on, we're up to just under 3,000 people. And what we try to do on the Facebook page is help and support new people as they're coming along. They're finding out about the issues that McClure's are no longer there, and there may be problems with the family protection trust, the wills, or even the lasting power of attorney. And we do that in a number of ways. We support each other. So, for example, one of the main things that we've done is we've set up a solicitor spreadsheet of solicitors that other people have used. And they're coming along asking questions, who can I use? And I know from example for myself, before I found the Facebook page, it had taken me 18 months and £3,000 before I found a solicitor who would actually take on my mum and dad's family protection trusts. And nobody wants to have to waste that amount of money. So we do things like that. And also there's a lot of things that people don't know about, like having to have specific types of house insurance. We've also got two gentlemen, in fact, who have help by do it yourself. And by do it yourself, I mean trying to use solicitors as a minimum. And so that we've now got processes there so that these two gentlemen, John and Russell, they can assist people who want to try to do this themselves, or they simply cannot afford. Aye, Russell. Or they just simply cannot afford to use solicitors. So throughout the process, when people join, we try to talk and support and help them get ridding themselves of McClure's. So that's what our Facebook page does. I'm not going to say any more that the majority of people here are from the Facebook page. So that's that. So I'd just like to go on now to speak about three aspects. I would like to speak about Jones White, the intermediaries, and then the impact on the clients. So from a background perspective, we all know that McClure's went into administration on the 29th of June 2021. And at that time, the FRP advisory came in, and it was their role to determine who would take over the client files. Jones White were not on the original list to take over the files, but they did acquire the files. And with that, there's an interesting note. By acquiring the files, Jones White would acquire the goodwill of the practice. This would allow Jones White opportunity to contact all clients to advise them of the demise of WWJ McClure and ask whether they wish to instruct the acquiring firm going forward. So that was one of the fundamental aspects of Jones White obtaining the clients. So Jones White themselves, they were established in 2013. And as I've said, they were not on the original list. They acquired 100,000 files which were passed over to Jones White, of which approximately 18,900 were family protection trusts. They also acquired the majority of McClure employees, and they paid the ransom of £340,000 for the files. Jones White wrote to some of McClure clients in June 2021, advising of the demise of McClure's. And one of the things that they wrote and told the clients was they advised that files and funds were transferred to them and the SRA and Law Society Scotland agreed to this. In the letter, they also stated that over the past 4 weeks, so that was May, June, they had been able to carry out the appropriate due diligence on the files that had been passed to them. They then go on to say, unfortunately, it has become increasingly apparent that the amount of business undertaken by McClure solicitors in the period leading up to them going into administration was simply unmanageable. So that is what Jones White stated. Jones White took over the 100,000 files and the staff. 3.5 years later, Jones White have only advised approximately 11,000 people of the demise of McClure. And those 11,000 are Family Protection Trust clients. We do have other clients, and those are such as wills and lasting power of attorney. Now, if you do some estimated sums, and these are only estimates because we do know there's 100,000 files, but what we haven't been able to find out is the actual number of clients involved. But if you were to say 100,000 files, and we know 18,900 were family protection trusts, and prior to that, there would have been the offer of wills and lasting power of attorneys. There is the possibility that there's 67,000 other clients out there who do not know about this issue. That includes the 7,000 additional Family Protection Trust people who haven't been told. Now, if you go on the way that they have been going, advising people, that could take 20 years before they tell everybody or the clients of McClure's. And that's 20 years our people don't have. A couple of other things to say about Jones White is that when they contact clients, they offer them to do a review of the file. No other solicitors that we found do this, and they charge them £400 for that. In addition to which, the charges that Jones White are charging the victims are greater than the majority of the other solicitors that we've found. And we've taken that from their book of costs that they provide. So that's just a little bit about Jones White. I'd now like to just go on and talk a little bit about the role of intermediaries, which you need to understand, especially from an English perspective, but there are some in Scotland as well. Intermediaries were used third parties. So a lot of our victims were introduced to McClure by a third party. And these can play, and we found, we know of at least 50 charities who worked with McClure's and received introduction fees for introducing introducing people to McClure's. 50 charities gained money from doing that. We're also aware of building societies in England and Scotland who targeted their clients of a certain age, introducing them to the will writing companies, initially regarding wills, but then it went on and progressed to lasting power of attorneys and then family protection trusts. Again, introduction fees were paid to the building societies. And we also have one lady who worked for a building society who has told us how they worked, how they identified the people, the clients who they would send on. To my way of thinking, and especially in England, the majority of people never met a McClure solicitor. Everything was done through these intermediaries. Everything was sold through them. And to my way of thinking, that is where a lot of the criminality lies from an English perspective. Scotland, there was intermediaries as well, and there was contractors I know, etc., who worked with McClure's solicitors. If we go on to the clients, and this is the most clients, they're now aged between 70 plus. We know that the people targeted 20 years ago were age 50 plus. We have that in writing in a document. When they took out the Family Protection Trust, it was on a one-off payment, following which there would be no subsequent costs incurred. The payment was for the lifetime of that trust. As I've said, the people who were targeted were elderly. We have examples of victims who were coming out of chemo in hospitals, and they were approached by charities. And we've got examples of people with dementia who the charities and other companies introduced to McClure's without doing the due diligence on their health. As I've said, there's up to 67,000 elderly people here. The 67,000 elderly people who believe they've done their best for their families, they've put their houses in order, and who are unaware of the potential issues that are lying ahead of them. As I've said, it wasn't just wills, it was wasn't just FPTs, it was powers of attorneys, and it was wills. We know that approximately 69% of those impacted are based in Scotland, 31% in England and Wales. But we also have clients who are living in France, Spain, Malta, New Zealand, Australia, and USA who are impacted. And with them, there comes an awful lot of other complications with regards to resolving the trust, especially when they live abroad and the trust members have to be in England or Scotland. If we look at the financial impacts, as a result of the failures that have come to light, we know of properties that have been left empty anywhere from between 2 to 5 years. And this is because McClure solicitors were on the deed, the title deeds, and it has taken so long to remove them. Thankfully now for England, we have got a better process. And again, that's thanks to one of our members who rang up Her Majesty's Land Registry, and we have agreement that victims of McClure's in England and Wales, their title deed, changes to their title deeds will be fast-tracked. So it doesn't take them 12 months. It can take a couple of weeks and their title deeds are amended. But for many, until we've got to the situation that we're in, all that people have been able to do is maintain the property, pay the bills, couldn't rent it out, couldn't sell it, nobody could live in it. Other financial impacts are to remove the McClure trustees from title deeds. They're demanding a charge. So we're having to pay them to come off title deeds, pay them what they are calling an administration fee. Some clients are having to sign indemnity forms to say that in the future that they will take no action against any of against the McClure solicitors involved. Certain solicitors involved or ex-solicitors will not sign to come off the title deeds without the client signing these indemnity forms. And that is just so wrong. We then have people who cannot access the monies that they've placed in trust, or they have to pay Jones White in some cases to access the money to get their money out of the trusts. We have McClures who have put themselves on as executors on wills, specifically against the requests of the testators. We have examples where money has been bequeathed to a charity in a will. And this is important because this is the first time we've been able to find a living person who has stood up and said, I didn't say that. But there was £50,000 bequeathed to a charity on this person's death. As there's also been things such as incorrect power of attorneys, care home fees having to be paid for, tax implications not being explained. And then there's the massive cost to the people to resolve the issues. Many have had to especially family protection trusts, having to pay solicitors to come assist. There's been the inheritance tax, there's been the 10-year tax, none of which was explained. And I know some of the members coming on after me are going to say more about that. And then the worst thing is they were taking money off people up to the day they went into administration. Totally not right. And finally, from the emotional impact side, we've got people so stressed, they're not sleeping. Many will not tell their families because they feel they've let them down. Some of them feel that they've been stupid because they feel they've been conned. Some have fallen out with their families. Some want to remain anonymous because their friends don't want to know. And there's the other issues that there's the time span from when they find out that they've got an issue to getting it resolved. It can take for an elder person in the 80s and 90s. It's a long time, and that's without raising a complaint. And in fact, some just actually leave it to their families to resolve when they've passed because they cannot afford to spend or cannot deal with the issues. The last thing I want to say, there's 3 points, and I was going to leave 2 of them until we had talked about the regulatory authorities, but unfortunately they're not attending. If you think about the family protection trusts, there was 18,900. 2 solicitors, McClure solicitors on each trust. So that's 39,800. Okay. If we look at, take a best act deal, if we look at, say, there was 8 to 10 solicitors involved, we're looking at between 4 to 5,000 trusts per solicitor, each looking after, and that is in addition to their day job. Then the second point, and this is specifically, I feel, for England. I feel that solicitors have more protection than their clients. Now, I apologise to anybody I upset who's a solicitor on here, but we found out from the SRA that once a solicitor removes themselves from the electoral roll, this SRA can take no action against them. I'm not sure of any other occupations where you've got that level of, I'll leave it there. And then the other thing is the complaints process. In England, you've got 1 year to raise a complaint from when you find out that there's an issue or you're notified. In Scotland, it's 3 years. Should there not be saying we're dealing with one company? Should there be one process across England, Scotland and Wales so that everybody's treated equally? There's also the time limits, the time that it's taking for the complaints to be finalised, and I recognise that's because there's so many, but the people involved don't necessarily have that amount of time to raise a complaint and see it through. And the final thing is the number of times McClure's and Jones White changed their names with Companies House. Should that not be putting a red flag up to somebody? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Annette, it's definitely us who should be thanking you. It's because of you persuading me to organise an event to try to bring people together that we're having the conversation tonight. Can we once again show our appreciation to Annette? Thank you very much indeed for what you're doing here. It's very, very helpful to bring everybody together and give everybody a chance to say what they want to say and ask what they want to ask. I see LP001's got his hand up. I'll come to you in a moment, sir. But first, let's go to Stuart McMillan. Stuart, very grateful that you're here with us tonight. He put his hand up, and apart from whatever else you might want to say, could you tell us what PTS is? Forgive me, maybe I should know, but I don't know what it is, sir. What is PTS, Stuart? Thank you.
I think it was meant to be RTS.
RTS, yes, RTS. Sorry, yeah.
I was requested to speak because I've not used Zoom for quite some time, so I couldn't find the put the hand.
Okay. I now know what RTS is. Thank you very much. Over to you then. Please do share with us what it is you'd like to speak about.
No problem. Thank you very much, Andy. So Annette, thank you for what you've just put on the record there. I represent Greenock and Inverclyde, sadly the home of McClure's. It's something I've been involved with for quite some time. Earlier on this year, I hosted 2 public meetings in Greenock. We had approximately 280 members of the public came along to those 2 meetings. At the meetings, I had invited the SLCC, the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission. And that was really helpful to do that. It was also really interesting, the comparison between the first meeting and the second. The first meeting, the majority of the people who were there were really informed about the situation that they faced. The second meeting, it was a lot less so. But the SLCC, they could answer some questions, but not everything because of the limitations that they have as well. However, I am very much aware of a number of constituents who were at both meetings, who then went through the complaints process, and they have managed to get successful outcomes as a result of that, which is great. So some constituents have contacted me to make me aware of that and to thank me for putting the meetings on in the first place. So we're in touch with a number of them. And any updates that I get, I put them out to the distribution list of individuals that I have. So that was 2 public meetings. I also put a motion down for a members' debate, and we had a members' debate in the Scottish Parliament chamber on the issue. And one of the asks that I put in my contribution was I do want to see some type of inquiry into the McClure's scandal. The issue for me, it kind of goes back to some of the points that Annette was raising. For me, it's about the timing of it, because there are still far too many people whose situation is unresolved. And if we end up having an inquiry too early, then it will give Jones White an opportunity to really focus on dealing with the inquiry as compared to actually progressing and getting the paperwork sorted out for the clients. So I would like an inquiry tomorrow if we were in that place, but we're not, sadly. On Jones White, things have changed certainly with Jones White because initially when they got the files, as Annette said, they were charging folk, but they shouldn't have been doing that. So when we got the information and got that clarified, so we were making people aware that Jones White should not have been charging individuals. And I'm aware that some individuals went back to Jones White after they'd already paid the money and they got the money paid back. So, because fundamentally, I'm not a lawyer, but I know that the various lawyers I've spoken to within the constituency, but also elsewhere in Scotland, there is a great sense of anger towards McClure's, and there's a sense of frustration because of what happened to all the clients at McClure's, and some of the actions that happened when the files went to Jones White. Because fundamentally, there's particular fees that lawyers in Scotland have to pay. So they know that they will be paying more because of the failings of McClure's. So there's a sense of people want to protect and defend their industry, but they know they can't defend the indefensible.
Yeah.
There's been one bill has went through the Parliament, the Trust and Succession Scotland bill is now an act. That's in operation. And we are currently going through the Regulation of Legal Services Bill. That's at stage 2. Now, the bill is, well, there are quite a lot of amendments, to say the least. That's amendments that have come in certainly from political parties, but also from professionals within the legal sector. So that bill should have been through the stage 2 process, but it hasn't thus far because of the number of amendments that came in. And the one thing is consistent, that everyone who's involved in the legal sector basically they want legal services to be improved in Scotland. And there was a fair amount of agreement initially, but there has been a fair amount of disagreement as the bill has been going through the process. And I think it's fair to say that if we can't find agreement, then the bill will fall, and there'll be no change. Certainly my ask when I talk to people within the wider sector, my ask is to try to find some compromise, so we can actually get the legal services and how they operate in Scotland into a better place to protect people.
Thank you, Stuart.
So,
These seem like very, very helpful suggestions. Please do finish off, Stuart. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut across you.
And just one final point I want to add, and that's just regarding, I think, well, the numbers of individuals. I think you're right in terms of the 18,900, the 100,000 files. I've had discussions with Jones White, but also I did have discussions with Andrew Robertson of McClure's. I spoke to Andrew towards at the very end of kind of my wider engagement with a number of individuals. And I think it's fair to say that that if the company didn't go into administration, then clients would have been getting charged even more money to look at the files. So, which is not it surprised me, to say the least, when they came out with that in the meeting. But I think the situation that we have is please keep up the pressure, please keep up the activity. That's certainly something I'm doing at my end, but please keep that up, because we need to get justice for everyone who actually has been affected. But the complaints process also in England through the SRA, please utilise that as much as you possibly can, because there will be individuals who will manage to get some type of recompense, but put the pressure upon Jones White, who have your files. Thank you.
Stuart, thank you very much. Can we show our appreciation to Stuart for taking time out to be with us tonight? Thank you, Stuart. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. I think one of the actions from tonight, probably, I mean, I'll discuss this with Annette when we kind of debrief tomorrow or the day after, is perhaps a formal letter, maybe involving the all-party parliamentary group, to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority and the equivalent in Scotland, just to basically ask them what their position on this matter is and to get them into dialogue. A lot can happen when you get various folks into dialogue. Thanks, Stuart. That's great. LP001 has just changed his name to Mr. Russell Craig. Good man. Russell, please, I think you had your hand up earlier. Please do take yourself off mute if you want to ask a question or make a comment, but please be brief because we want to get to Agnes as soon as you can. Thank you, Russell.
No, it was just I was doing something else, so just
okay.
Ignore me.
All right, in which case we'll ignore Russell and we'll go straight to Agnes. Agnes, over to you. I think you're going to tell us a little bit about your case, Agnes, if you can. That would be most helpful. After Agnes, we go to Lena, Lucy, Paul, and Kenneth. Agnes, to you first. Thank you, Agnes.
Hi, everyone. I don't know what I've just done. Sorry. My name's Agnes Dupere, and my mum, who I'm representing, is Agnes Henery, Henery. We both invited McClure into our house, sorry, my mum's house, based on the fact that in November, there's usually an advert on television for free wills, and we totally fell for that because we've been watching Paul O'Grady and wanted to give money to the Dogs Trust. So we thought, well, let's go for it. And my mum, one of her words were, McClure are the oldest firm in Glasgow. Let's go with them. They seem really good. So we had someone come to the house. Her name was, what was her name? Karen Anderson. Her title was Estate Planning Consultant. So she came to the house on 2 occasions. The first one was to talk, well, we initially invited her to do a will for me and a will for Mum. She managed to talk Mum into putting the house into a trust. I can't remember all the ins and outs of how it went about. We had absolutely and still have no intentions of putting Mum into a care home. We hadn't even discussed that. So when she brought that up, it wasn't something that was even in our heads. So that was something that came from them. They presented 2 brochures. Mum agreed to go ahead with it, and I agreed to a will and a power of attorney. And my mum agreed to a will also. So the girl, that was in November of 19. And in December, she came back and collected, or we received some paperwork, sorry, from McClure with what the will would look like and all that stuff. And she came back in December and collected her checks, which were for quite a sum of money. And at absolutely no point was it ever discussed the fact that McClure's would become trustees. So that was in 2019 leading into 2020. In 2021 January, which was roughly a year later, we both had an annual review, and we had nothing to change. Nothing different was stated from them. So everything just went ahead. And from what I later found out, they went into administration in the April, and that was in the January of the same year. We received a letter on November the 5th of 2021 to say, from Jones White, to say the company had gone into administration, and they wanted us to pay them £300 plus VAT to review the files. And I have a bit of a legal background from America, even though I'm a nurse, but I instantly jumped on it and reviewed everything we'd received. On New Year's Eve, I phoned the company, Jones White, and I did get a girl who answered, and she sent me their fees, and I went through their fees, and there was no way we were paying their fees. So I wrote to everyone. I wrote to Santander asking if we could get our money back. Went through everybody, went to their insurance company, which I found online. So it's been going on for a few years now with us, and my mum has been very, very stressed by it. I tried not to share very much with her because of the stress, and just really did it all myself until the website was started on Facebook, and I went, not the website, sorry, Facebook, and I found a girl who recommended Alan Eccles, who's here tonight. And I went in and saw Alan, and Alan closed the trust for us because we had absolutely no need to have a trust in the first place. And we redid the wills. And that's about where we've ended up, except to say my mum has ended up no worse off. And considering she put out a lot of money, she's very lucky to have received quite a large check from the SLCC. The SLCC have been fantastic with Mum. They have not been fantastic with me. I have been told I am getting nothing back. But Mum did have cataracts and could not possibly have read or signed anything. I obviously don't have cataracts. So that's where we've ended up today. She got a check today, and I got a letter today saying I would be getting nothing. And that's about it for us. So not as interesting as other people, sorry, but it's been very stressful nonetheless. Thank you.
Agnes, thank you so much. Can we show appreciation to Agnes? It's not easy talking about this kind of stuff, especially to a crowd of mostly strangers. Agnes, well done. You must be feeling really bittersweet. Great news in terms of your mum's check, but it just doesn't seem to make sense to me that they treat your mum correctly and you not. I just don't get that. But I'm sure there's
two
some
different
argument
people that reviewed the cases.
Is that what it comes down to, really? Is there a way to
No,
challenge it, Agnes? Can you challenge it
I
in some
have.
way? You
I
have,
have
yeah,
challenged it. Yeah, I did write back and say that I didn't accept her recommendations,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that was just today. So we'll see where that goes.
What we find in very, very general terms, Agnes, and I'm not trying to teach you or anybody to suck
Mhm.
eggs here, is the probability of getting justice is directly related to how much support you get from parliamentarians and how much that support is multiplied in the media. Do you remember at school when we all learned about how to make a fire? You need three things. You need a fuel, you need heat, and you need oxygen. You can't have a fire without those three things. Two of them is not good. You need all three. In our world of campaigning, it's the same thing. Instead of needing fuel, oxygen, and heat, you need support in Parliament, a really good argument, a sound, logical argument, and support in the media. And if you've got all three, you've got a chance of getting justice. If you've only got two of those three, it may not happen. So that's why this idea of bringing people together and trying to organize a concerted media campaign type thing is actually really, really important. Thanks, Agnes. Thank you very much indeed. That was great. That was great. After Agnes, we're going to go to, where's my little list here? I've lost it. Who's after Agnes? I know, I'll look at the web page. After Agnes, we go to
Lena.
Lena. Can we show our appreciation to Lena once she's spoken? But Lena, over to you now. Please take yourself off mute. Thanks, Annette. You're doing a good job of managing me. Thank you. Lena, over to you. Thank you. If Lena's here, please take yourself off mute. If Lena's not here, we'll very swiftly go to Lucy. Lena, where are you? Sounds like the beginning of a song, doesn't it? Don't worry, folks. Don't
Hello,
worry. Start singing. Lena,
can
are
you
you
hear
there?
me?
Yeah, we can. We
Oh,
can.
sorry.
We've got you up as Zoom user. I'm going to change your name from Zoom user to Lena so we know who you are. Lena, please, over to you. Thank you. Please do share your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, all I can do is really just tell my story from what's actually happened.
Yeah.
I came into money through an accident which has made me unable to work or anything in the future, which was quite a big stress on my family anyway. When all this was happening, I wasn't fully aware or understanding exactly what was going on. My financial advisor turned up with the man from McClure, who's the one who set everything up. All I wanted was things to be organised where my son and daughter got what was left from if anything was to happen for me. At no time I'd asked for it to be put into a trust. I only found this out when I tried to sell my house. I was then told, I only found out about the place going into administration, McClure, sorry, at the beginning of January when I tried to sell my house. I was then told I couldn't sell it because obviously it was in trust. They owned 60% of it. I was then told that I couldn't take any money out because of this. I was needing my boiler fixed, as everybody does, and couldn't even get money to get that sorted. No heating, etc. Found out I've not had house insurance for the last 9 years, well, since all this has happened, because I should have had it under a trust. I should have informed them that I didn't own it fully.
Shocking.
I said a lot more than that when I found out.
I'm sure you did, Lena. I'm sure you did. I mean, imagine that, folks. Well, you don't realise you haven't got the insurance. I mean, that could. Oh, sorry, let's back to you, Lena. You've got me wound up now. Carol, Lena, back to you.
Well, it's £40 a month, and that's been for the last 9 years. Well, 7 years since I've been paying in for it, so it adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Ended up fast forwarding. I hadn't got told about what had happened, and it wasn't until I tried to sell the house because I was wanting to downsize. Because my daughter and my son's moved out now, and what had happened was it was Linda Ritchie that I'd spoken to from the Victims of McClure page. When I found that page, it was a godsend because I'd been going about like a blind bat, trying to work out what to do. I had no experience at all in law or anything. I'm more of an arty-farty person. So obviously I had no idea how to work it. And it was Linda Richardson that wrote a letter for me to forward to Jones and White. In that letter, she'd specifically put on it that she wanted a JPEG, not a zip file, to which they proceeded to send a zip file. But because of my ignorance on it, I didn't understand this. So I then got in touch with Mr. Eccles, who I was kindly put on to from Annette, who's been great. He's helped me move forward. He's taken everything that I've needed done, because as I say, I'm not the best with understanding all this. And he's helped me tremendously in getting everything put right and putting everything in order, to the extent now, since January, that is me now, thanks to Annette, Alec and Linda, that is me now since January, just now got it all sorted. Well, getting in the process of it being sorted. Everything's out of McClure Trust in that now, and is back into my son, my daughter, my name now. So, yeah. So,
Lena, that's fantastic. You've given us a very clear, very concise overview of what's happened to you. I'm really, really, really cross about this no insurance point. So your cover is invalidated because you're no longer the legal owner. Therefore,
and I
you
wasn't
can't.
aware of that.
You weren't even aware of it.
No, not at all.
There's got to be, I don't know if Stuart's still around, but this is a point we've got to pick up. There's got to be some process whereby, in the event that somebody sets up a trust, there's a piece of due diligence done to check what the ramifications of setting that trust up might be in terms of a range of things, including the sudden nullification of insurance policies. Imagine if your house got flooded or got hit by a lorry or something horrific like that. Oh, that's awful. Lena, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to go straight from Lena to our next person speaking, which is Lucy. Lucy Hopkins, I saw you earlier. There you are, Lucy. Please do. Oh, you've taken yourself off mute already. You're clearly a very organised lady. Thank you. Over to you, Lucy. Please tell us what you'd like to. Thank you. Oh, Lucy, we can't hear you. I know that you're not on mute, so there's a problem with your microphone, I think. Don't worry, don't panic. If we can't hear you now, we'll try you later. So stand by, please, Paul Piggott, who might be stepping in. Yeah, let's go to Paul. Lucy, we'll come back to you later. In the meantime, see if you can suss what's up with your microphone, okay? Thank you. Paul, can you jump in there?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name's Paul Pygott. I'm speaking to you on behalf of my
Thanks,
mum
Paul.
and dad, Ivy Pygott and Stuart Pygott, and the rest of my family.
Right.
In 2009, my son worked for the Leeds Building Society, and he was instructed to encourage customers to meet with a guy called David Gagan from the will writing company. David Gagan went to my mum and dad's house, and I sat in on the meeting. Throughout the meeting, it was decided to set up mirror wills and mirror trusts, i.e. everything, if one parent passed away, everything went to the other, vice versa. Taking on board what Lena just said, we were not made aware that by doing this, any insurance would be invalidated. So we paid 10 years house insurance, and at any time, if anything had happened to that building, who knows what would have happened, because I didn't find out about the insurance thing until after the building had been sold. Anyway, moving back, 6 months after they took out the trust, sadly my dad passed away, but we were instructed by McClure to leave the trust, his trust, in place. Everything went on till around about 2019, when sadly my mum had a fall. And after a short spell in hospital, she was told that she would need 24-hour care, i.e. 4 times a day for a carer to come and look after her wasn't enough. They were concerned that she might fall in between. We spoke to the Leeds City Council to give them all the details that they wanted, and for the next 12 months, everything went along as we thought, hunky-dory. We paid what we believed was my mum's share of the care home fees. And then in the middle of 2020, Leeds Council started sending a barrage of questions, which I passed on to McClure. Anyway, round about the beginning of October 2020, Leeds Council sent me an email saying that they believed that the trust was a sham trust set up purely and simply to avoid care home fees. Passed all these details on to McClure. McClure said they would fight it, and even went as far as saying that they would contact the professional standards for solicitors and get them to cite the solicitors from Leeds City Council for making such spurious allegations. Again, sadly, 3 weeks later, after I got the notification from Leeds Council, my mum passed away, so she knows nothing of this. I kept trying to contact McClure's, and after 2 weeks, I got a phone call, and I thought, oh, we're finally getting somewhere. Turns out that all they were ringing me up for was to try and sell me and my wife a trust. Obviously, being in the middle of the turmoil that I was in, there was no way I was taking another trust out. But when somebody's holding all the purse strings, you don't do that. I just said, well, we'll see what happens when this gets resolved. Anyway, for the next 3 to 4 months, I just kept emailing them, asking what's going on, what's going on. And in the meantime, the care home started sending me letters saying that we owed them £26,500.
So say that again. Say that again.
The care home sent us a bill for 26,500 because Leeds City Council had never paid a penny of what we believed was their share of the care home fees.
And you thought they were paying it?
I thought they was paying it. I thought they was actually coming after me to get the money back. In actual fact, they'd never been paid a penny from what we thought was the council's share of it.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I was landed with a £26,500 bill. It dragged on, and all the time I kept getting these reminders, and fearful of the fact that if it went to court and I got tasked with, fees for legal fees from that, etc., etc., I kept contacting McClure and saying, what should I do about this bill?
Yeah.
Eventually, around about shortly before the end of April, I sent another email to McClure saying, look, can somebody have the decency to give me some idea of what is going on? I said, I'm frantic here. These members of the family, being executor of the will, that maybe assumed I was holding on to the money, and I wasn't. I was
Right.
waiting for them to resolve everything so we could start and fold everything up. Anyway, shortly into May, I believe it was, I got an email from a lady that was my previous contact at McClure's, and saying that my current contact no longer worked for McClure's. I'll hold my hand up and say I didn't initially notice that the header had changed to Jones White. Initially, I was contacted and said that they would take the case on board.
Right.
And about a week later, I got another message saying that something along the lines of what Annette said earlier on, that there was just too many people that were in a similar situation to me, and that they just couldn't justify spending the amount of money that they'd have to spend to rectify everything. And she did even, off the record, say that it was probably one of the reasons why McClure's went under, because they'd oversold their capacity.
Right.
Anyway, basically, I got a letter saying that I needed to go elsewhere, seek legal advice to get everything sorted out and get the bequests from my mum and dad passed out to family, which cost me just short of another £6,000. I did find out after everything was settled that Leeds Council made their final decision based on the fact that they never heard anything from the family or McClure's, which is something I wasn't aware of because I had handed everything over to McClure's to resolve. So I didn't know they were waiting for a response from anybody.
Yeah.
So currently, 26,500 paid to the care home, £6,000 in additional solicitors' fees, Plus, I don't know what the initial cost of setting the trust in the first place was, but we've got to be pushing top end of, £30,000 out of pocket with all this lot. But one thing that does come to mind is, I don't know why some people that went to the Will Writing Company were sent to McClure's and some were sent to what ended up being the Phillips Trust. I don't know what that split was.
Yeah.
Leeds Building Society appear to be making some restitution to the Phillips Trust, but they're just shrugging the shoulders regarding anybody that went down the McClure's route. And I also don't know why Leeds City Council said no when allegedly somebody said that they was under the Bradford City Council, which is literally next door, and theirs were accepted. Now,
You'd
I
think
don't want
there'd
to
be
take
some
up anybody
consistency.
else's. Sorry?
You'd think there'd be some consistency, wouldn't you? You'd think that they would suss what was the right thing to do, given all the rules and regulations, and it would be the same in both situations. It's disturbing that there's such a lot of variance in the outcomes that people are experiencing based upon how individuals are interpreting their cases. It doesn't seem right to me. So it's not quite right
I
there.
think it's another case of your postcode lottery.
You could be right, Paul. You could be right. Paul, thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us. I know that Lucy's sound's working okay, so let's thank Paul. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. And let's go to Lucy, whose sound is working a-okay. Lucy, back to you. Cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Right. Hello, everybody. My father-in-law sadly passed away in June of last year, but he'd been approached before 2016 by a wealth management company that were sort of promising the earth that if you put your money into trust, you won't have to pay for nursing home fees, blah, blah, blah. My background is Department of Work and Pensions, so I understand deprivation of capital, which is if you get rid of your money, you are still treated as if you've got the money.
Yeah.
Also, my father-in-law's wife is 15 years younger, was living in the property, and there would be no way on this planet that they would make her homeless to pay for his nursing home fees. So I had a very heated conversation with him. I said, do not touch it with a barge pole, please. So my stepmother-in-law is 15 years younger than my father-in-law. There was no way they would make her homeless in order to pay for his nursing home fees. So in 2016, he understood not to go down the trust route. In 2019, he presented us with a family protection trust. And I said, my first reaction to him was, please don't tell me you have done what we told you not to do. No, 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 this is something different. Well, sadly, he passed away last year. We've had all the documents from Jones Wyatt now showing various bits of information. He was originally contacted through Age Concern in Exmouth to be introduced to a guy called Sean Hamlod, who is an estate planning consultant from McClure's. I've actually got his business card here. And basically the conversation that I've got a record of saying that my father-in-law was fully retired. He was looking up to update his current will, at the same time was interested in any other ideas. He was concerned about making it too difficult for my husband, my sister-in-law and his wife with regards to his estate. What was interesting, the record of assets that were recorded during that interview was saying that my father-in-law and his wife had decided to keep their two estates completely separate because they were both second marriages. She had children, grown-up children, as did my father-in-law. His actual estate, the property was valued in 2019 at 280,000. His savings valued at 40,000. In fact, the property has now been valued in 2023 at 340,000 and his assets at 81,000. So his assets had doubled in 4 years. Now, if anybody can tell me what company gives that return, I'd like some of that as well, please. You know, it was just, everything was wrong with the figures. Anyway, he'd left in his will that the property was going to be divided between his wife and his 2 children. Now, because the property was put into trust, it meant that he would get the £325,000 allowance for inheritance tax.
Yeah.
But because the property was in trust, he didn't get the other 175,000 allowance because he was passing the property on to his family. So on an estate that has now come in at the value of, I think it came in total of about 420, the cost that has been against the estate now is £35,000 inheritance tax. It cost him £3,500 to take the trust out in the first place. Because of all the palaver with Jones Wyatt getting all the documents and everything, my husband and his sister went to a solicitor to deal with the estate. Their fees have come in at £9,400. We're now asking Nash & Co to actually deal with the trust, and their fee is £2,350. Yeah, £2,352. So in total, to wind up my father-in-law's estate is costing £50,000, which is absolutely ridiculous on an estate that was 420,000. Whereas if he hadn't have been advised to take out this family protection trust, the guy that had the conversation with him said, oh, it'll be 6 years before you actually get any value to this. My father-in-law, he was 85 at this point. The average age for a man in the UK life expectancy is 80. So he would have been 91. The guy that did this Sean Hamlod said, I have no concerns over his capacity. Was that medically? You know, he had, so overall, it's like what he wanted to do. My father-in-law has actually put in here that he didn't want to cause any inheritance tax issues for his children when they inherit from him, not realising that it's cost the estate £50,000 because of this trust. That's basically what it boils down to. So I've got the record of all the conversation, and it's just so distressing because my father-in-law would be so upset knowing that he's been hoodwinked into having this done to him.
Yeah.
When it was, to me, it's, my view is it's somebody chasing commission rather than actually looking at the full picture.
Lucy, it's heartbreaking hearing this. You're reminding me so much of the conversations we've had with many of the Phillips Trust scandal victims. Some of those folks are here right now. We've got Chuck Hodgkinson and his missus here tonight. We're talking really significant amounts of money, aren't we? We're talking big chunks of real money that somebody somewhere would have worked for or sacrificed other things to build for the family. It's got to be wrong. It's got to be wrong. Lucy, thank you for sharing that. You seem like a pretty organized and motivated person, so keep at it. And the more of us who are working together to keep at it, hopefully with some support in Parliament, folks like Stuart, folks like Kate Osborne, etc., getting some more media coverage, we can really just embarrass the legal profession into realizing what a shambolic mess it seems to be presiding over when a law firm goes under and leaves all these clients up the creek without a paddle. I mean, it's shocking. Lucy, thank you very much. Let's show our appreciation to Lucy. Thank you very much, Lucy. And I think the last of our speakers before we go to the lawyer folks is Kenneth. Kenneth, please, to you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. After Kenneth, we'll be going to Alan Eccles, then to Alex Stania. Forgive me if I've mispronounced your surname correctly, Alex, but let's go to Kenneth now. Thank you. Folks, just quickly, Claire Springle's a lawyer who we know very well through the Phillips Trust Corporation situation. She's been helping lots and lots of victims of Phillips Trust. You just put something in the chat. I haven't even read it yet, but Claire's somebody we've learnt to know and rate very highly. Thanks, Claire. I'll read what you put in the chat in a minute. Meanwhile, let's go to Kenneth. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello, Andy.
Hi, Kenneth. We can hear you loud and clear. You've got a lovely, rich voice, sir. Radio
Yeah,
2 voice.
I'm
Over
Geordie
to you.
voice. I'd just like to apologise for being a little bit late coming in, but I'll take you through my story in this whole debacle, which is not finished, but I've achieved quite a bit in a couple of years, in the last 2 or 3 years. It was in 2008 that a representative from Newcastle Building Society, who I was dealing with a mortgage and savings, came to my house and introduced me to the will writing company for a plan for my future. At the time, I'm a single parent. I wanted to leave everything, and I still do, to my 3 children. I worked abroad a lot, and I trusted these people, especially the guy from the Newcastle Building Society, who I had a relationship with banking, through another company, the Co-op Bank. But at any rate, and I believe that Newcastle Building Society knew exactly what they were doing when they advised me to set up this family trust. It's been called 3 things by these solicitors. One's called a family protection trust. Other paperwork, they call it a discretionary trust. In other paperwork, they call it asset protection trust. But I'm not sure the implications of why they keep giving it a different name. But they're out of business. I've never, ever spoke to anybody apart from a secretary in McClure solicitor. Never met a solicitor, never spoke to a solicitor. During my meeting with the Newcastle Building Society and the will writing company in my house in 2008, McClure's solicitor's name was never, ever mentioned. Never mentioned. When I got paperwork through the following year, I seen 2 names, Robertson and Duff, from McClure's solicitors. The first thing I'd done, I questioned this with Newcastle Building Society and the will writing company. I was informed by the will writing company that procedure says that you have to have professional solicitors on your trust. During the meeting, when I set it up, it was for me 3 children, me 2 daughters and my son. The only names that were ever mentioned. At any rate, as the years went by, I was assured that it was only a procedure, that they had no influence on the trust whatsoever. But you had to have them to set, they had to have them to set the trust up. In 2019, I did buy the freehold of my house. I was then informed by the conveyance solicitor that was doing the freehold that I couldn't buy it because McClure's solicitors were named on the title deeds of the property. Okay, so I set about through another financial advisor who helped me out. He contacted McClure solicitors, spoke to a secretary, explained the situation, told them that McClure's name should never appear on any of the paperwork. In 2019, August 2019, McClure's sent me a new deed of appointment, removing Robertson and Duff and replaced them with the 2 of my other 2 children. So my 3 children were now on the trust, according to the paperwork I got from McClure's. In 2022, I put my house up for sale. My house sold after 2 days. I was then informed by the same conveyance solicitor that I couldn't sell the house because Robertson and Duff were still on the title deeds within the land registry. So the piece of paper they sent me, a piece of appeasement, was just, it's a sham. So I believe right from the very beginning that I've been led up the garden path and conned all the way through. All the way through. And I was never informed by the will writing company that they had went into liquidation. Never informed by McClure's that they had went into liquidation. The only contact I've had with Jones White was my contact to them. They sent me a PDF file, which I couldn't extract the information from. I'm not very good with computers, so I took me the file and the computer to a computer expert. They couldn't extract. They extracted some of the things from the file, but they couldn't extract everything. They said that there was some kind of lock on some of the files, so they couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I've got a PDF file, a zip file that I can only partially access. So that's partly a bit of my story. But I've been in touch with several government, with my MP, with the legal ombudsman, the financial ombudsman, complaints procedure with the Scottish Solicitors Society and Newcastle Building Society. Newcastle Building Society have refused to accept any responsibility, but they paid me £500 compensation because me lasting power of attorney, which was paid for in 2018, had never been registered. So they offered me a compensation of £500, which the financial ombudsman told me to accept it. Take the £500. This case will go on for a long time. At least you've got £500. It doesn't release them from any obligation whatsoever, and it's stated that in the paperwork that I've got here. So that's
what's
the situation. My case is still being handled by the legal ombudsman. I last heard from them about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Backlogs and people on holiday, different things. So the case is still going on, whether they're going to decide to take my case or not. So that's the situation. I'm nowhere near what the other people, Lucy and Paul, the money, but I'm about £7,000–8,000 down with the cost of the trust, loss of the sale of my house, employing two more conveyance solicitors, and the list just goes on. I really want to get out of the whole debacle, but how much money do they expect me to pay? I'm 75-year-old, been retired for 10 years. I'm not going to throw more money and more money and more money. And by the way, I had to pay these two solicitors £100 each to remove their signatures last year.
Thank you for explaining it. And what you haven't directly mentioned, but it's very obvious that it is the case, sir, is the absolute aggravation of it all, the frustration, the worry, the distraction. You want to be getting on, enjoying your retirement, not worrying about all this stuff. Folks, it really does sound like it's been a complete mess. Ken, thank you very much indeed for telling us what's happened. I've had a few comments coming to me about, can I squeeze a comment in here? Can I squeeze a comment in there? We're a little bit behind schedule. I want us to wrap up by 1940 at the very, very latest, if that's okay, folks. Okay, so if I can ask the following speakers to be as succinct as they'd like to be, but please do this. Feel free to put comments in the chat, questions in the chat. The Facebook group, obviously some of you use that very, very well. Please do that. And if Annette persuades me to, we can always run another event like this in another 2 or 3 months' time to catch up. I think we've had about 4, 5 or 6 meetings like this for the Phillips Trust Corporation people over the last year or so. So it's really down to Annette to help organise that. Meanwhile, thank you very much indeed, Ken. I think we're going to Alan Eccles next, aren't we? Yeah, I think it's Alan next. Alan, please take a moment to introduce yourself and your firm and share with us what you'd like to. Thank you, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you. Evening, everyone. Yes, my name's Alan Eccles from Bannatyne, Kirkwood, France. Solicitors, we're based in Glasgow, but we've helped out on McClure cases with people who have been based across Scotland. I suppose what we have been trying to do with the cases that we've got involved in is try and get things sorted out and get the trusts and other things back on an even keel, rather than necessarily trying to rake over the coals. And I suppose an aim with what we've been doing is getting the family back in control. And yes, Lena mentioned we've been helping her recently, and these things are sortable, outable. I mean, we met Lena only about 5 weeks ago, and now we've got the trustees changed and the family back in control of the trust, got it registered with HMRC and things like that. So I think very much trying to get a focus on let's get it sorted out, and then if people want to be raking over the coals of what's happened with McClure or Jones White in this experience, then people can do that, but at least they know they've got their trust sorted out. In most cases, the trusts definitely do need a tidy up. We haven't identified any complete disasters yet that we haven't been able to fix. Those, and it was mentioned earlier about that tax point about you lose the residence nil rate band if a house is in a trust, which you would otherwise have if you have it in your own name, is probably the main danger point that we have been trying to identify. In terms of costs that we've been seeing, not awful on the whole. I mean, I would say the average cost for someone with us has been maybe about $750 to $1,000 plus VAT to get everything sorted out, and that should have them sorted out for the foreseeable. We have been saying to the vast majority of people we've been meeting to keep the trust. That's not necessarily to say that they should have had a trust in the first place, but it is usually going to be much better for them to keep the trust rather than wind up the trust. It's going to be easier and more cost effective in most cases to keep the trust. The only group who really probably should be definitely bringing that trust end are those who are affected by that inheritance tax point. And I think as a general thing, maybe it goes to the past, both in McClure, maybe Jones White. I think the general concept of what McClure was doing was kind of okay. What we have experienced is that they maybe weren't so hot on the boring stuff, the boring trust law and the boring tax law that underpins everything that's happening here. And with the numbers they were dealing with, couldn't really cope with that. And I think that's the thing, certainly from a Scottish point of view, there's quite a lot of trust law going on in what they were doing. Even in cases where there isn't tax to pay, there's quite a lot of tax law involved in this. So there are technical things. I suppose I'm just somebody whose life is so exciting that I deal with trusts day in, day out. So we can sort these kind of things out. And we've seen a lot of the first cases I started to get, because maybe about a third of my work comes from other lawyers, was cases from other lawyers. And then from there, we started to sort of see how we deal with them. And we've kind of got relatively streamlined processes with Jones White, with Andrew Robertson, and others to try and get things done as quickly as possible. So that's just a wee overview of what we've been doing. I do have, for those who haven't had the excitement of a review carried out of their trust, and I jokingly sort of say to people who have had a review and paid for it, I give them the review that they would have got, and it takes about 30 seconds for me to do it. But I do have, and I will attempt to put in the chat for anyone who's interested, a little sort of article or blog which covers some of the main points that might come up in a review and some of the things somebody might want to check out. So I will attempt to put that in the chat. So yes, if people have got questions at some point, feel free to fire them in, but that's just our experience so far.
Alan, thank you very much indeed. Please do put that in the chat. Please feel free to put a link to your website in the chat if people wanted to follow up afterwards. Please don't hesitate to do that. We're going to hear from Alex shortly and then Philip after that. We'll wrap up at roughly 8:45 at the very, very latest, folks. We're squeezing quite a bit in here tonight. We've got lots of speakers and it's all been really worth listening to. I'm just blown away at how can such an established profession like the legal profession end up with such a lot of mess here? I mean, the reputational damage this must be causing the various bodies must be pretty extreme. Alan, thank you very much indeed. And let Alex please take yourself off mute and go for it. We've got you on the screen as Alan Janes. Now, I'm assuming it's not Alan Janes. I'm assuming, sir, it's actually Alex Stanier. Is that right? Yeah?
Alex, and you pronounced my surname perfectly, Andy. Thank you very
There
much.
we go. Well, with a surname like mine, Agathangelo, I'm quite good at pronouncing people's surnames. There we go. There we go. Over to you, sir.
I'm a partner in the firm of Alan James, and we're based in High Wycombe. I was asked to comment, and I'll try and be as brief as possible, on the scale of the problem and whether this mis-selling is still happening in light of the failure of McClure's. I think it's probably worth briefly picking up on a couple of points that were raised. We hear stories like Agnes and Lena and Lucy all the time in our practice. Sadly, really common. Like Alan, we spend a lot of time helping people either out of this, planning if it's going to have a capital tax ramification, or sometimes keeping trusts in place, especially if your house is below 325. That's the sort of time we might keep that in place. If your house is worth more than 325, or you're a married couple and it's worth more than 650, that loss of the residential nil rate band is significant. I know we heard earlier from someone that paid an extra £50,000 of tax. You could pay, between a married couple, an extra £140,000 of completely avoidable inheritance tax by putting your house into trust. Great to hear about the progress that Stuart's been making in Scotland. It's probably worth briefly mentioning the SRA, because I suspect they're not going to want to be involved in this at all. They have no jurisdiction in Scotland, no jurisdiction over McClure's. And a big part of the problem in England is unregulated practices. So these intermediaries that people are getting referred to, they're always unregulated. The SRA has no power over them at all. So my suspicion is they're going to be completely powerless to deal in England and Wales. I think it is worth mentioning that if McClure's have an unregulated intermediary in England that they know are selling a trust they've prepared to an end user, it is a crime for an unregulated provider to sell trust services, to create trusts and sell those services to people in England and Wales. So it was a crime for the McClure's solicitors to be involved in that. It's aiding and abetting that crime of the unregulated provider. So I know Annette touched on that criminality earlier. That's the angle in England and Wales from there, and part of the scandal, without a doubt. A bit like the insurance point, actually. So we've known this issue for a long time now. We've known this has been bubbling under in the unregulated sector in England and Wales. We've known that property is uninsured when it's in trust. There's a similar sort of shocking financial fact, which is if you've put as we've seen, if you're encouraged to put the equity of your house into trust and you have a mortgage, then almost always that breaches your mortgage terms. So these providers will stick a restriction on your land registry title to note the existence of a trust. If your mortgage company ever finds out about that, often they don't, because they don't check your title. But if they do, they're going to say, oh, you've breached your mortgage terms. We're now going to default you onto our standard variable rate. Could cost people a huge amount of money. Absolutely quite shockingly, we have a trust at the moment of I won't name them, but there's an infamous unregulated provider in England and Wales. We all know about them. I've got their standard letter in front of me that talks clients through how to commit mortgage fraud when they're coming to remortgage their property. And we've put a restriction on your title. If you come to remortgage this property, you're going to have to take that restriction away and tell the mortgage company your house isn't in trust, and then put the restriction back on afterwards. All of that is a crime. It's a mortgage fraud. So absolutely horrific advice. I've been asked to talk, and I'll post the link in the chat later, because I wrote an article about mis-selling and asset protection trusts, specifically in the unregulated sector. It does occasionally happen with solicitors, but in theory, the consumer redress is greater. It's been great to hear about the SLCC and their involvement and have been able to get redress. There's no equivalent in England and Wales when there's an unregulated provider. But I wrote an article about this. I'll post the link in there.
Please do. Please do.
And I would say then very, very briefly, because I was asked initially to comment on whether or not this is ongoing. In a way, McClure's were the enigma. There's regulated practice involved in this. The vast majority of this mis-selling is coming from the unregulated sector. So we're still seeing a huge amount of this. And the failure of McClure's has made very little difference. The vast majority of trusts that we see that have been missold have come from elsewhere. They haven't come from McClure's. We only have a few of them in the department.
Alex, thank you very much. Please do feel free to put into the chat whatever you'd like to. Same with anybody else. If you're a professional, a lawyer, a consultant, and you want to raise awareness of something you've got that might be useful to others, feel free to pop it into the chat. Don't hesitate to do that. We'll show our appreciation now down to Alex, and then we'll invite Philip Meadowcroft to spend just 2 minutes just squeezing in his experience, because Philip's a very long-standing Transparency Task Force member, been a member for years and years and years and years and years. And he mentioned to me the other day that he can relate to some of this from a completely different perspective. Philip, as concisely as you possibly can, please show off that lovely baritone voice of yours and tell us what's been going on in your world. Thank you, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, everybody. Some dreadful stories, brilliantly told. Thank you very much for that. I come from a different perspective on this, and that I am an executor to some friends who are mercifully still alive in their 80s, who had their wills drawn up 10 years ago by a firm, perfectly reputable firm. None of the pressures that we've heard this evening were applied, but that firm a couple of years back was taken over in a group of firms, and the SRA clearly did not like the new overriding owners and closed the whole lot down. And that was a pretty startling event, certainly not communicated to us. We only found out when our friends wanted to make some minor adjustments to their wills. I rang the firm up and they said, well, we're not really here now. Thank you very much. And I found no information whatsoever about the closure. 80,000 files were transferred by the SRA, it would appear, to any firm that wanted them. And goodness me, who got them? Jones White. And I then found out that those files have been divvied up because they had far too much to cope with, and they came back 300 miles south from Glasgow. I found them with another firm. All this information I had to glean for myself by ferreting around here, there, and everywhere. And I found them in a firm which had not a great reputation on Trustpilot, to say the least. And I found that the warehouse they had hired down the street was now occupied with the files, and they were going to apply perhaps 2 days a week on a good week for somebody to go down there and try to catalogue the whole thing out. We wanted to get hold of the wills, and it took me 6 months of calling them about every 5 to 7 days, being an absolute pain in the butt, pressing home, finding 1 or 2 people in the firm who were more helpful than others. And finally, after 6 months, which is just a blinking of the eye in terms of many things we've heard this evening, we've found the wills. I cannot believe that the Solicitors Regulation Authority can permit legal scandals of this nature to occur. Wills and trusts out with the regulatory orbit. They must be brought in. We can't have any Tom, Dick and Harry wanting to set up a will writing services. I would prefer to see these all within the official solicitor network, because for the obvious reasons of what we've heard going on this evening, and cut out all these cowboys and middlemen and intermediaries, call them what you like. They're unregulated, and we are talking of people's life savings and assets, and at a point in their lives when they don't want this kind of stress. So my news was, in a sense, is some good news. We found the wills, but for goodness sake, you must have to go on the kind of wild goose chase and expensive chase that I have done to find the wills of our friends. I'll shut up at that point. I've gone over 2 minutes, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, you have, but you did that superbly concisely. Folks, the Transparency Task Force has got ambassadors in, I think it's about 18 countries around the world. Philip's one of them. Philip's probably the best guy in the UK, as far as I'm concerned, at holding senior executives to account at their AGMs. If you get to know Philip, he'll tell you stories about various things over the years. He's damn good at it. He really is damn good at it. Philip, thank you very much indeed for being a Transparency Task Force ambassador and for sharing your a story of your frustrations. Thank you so much. Annette, we all have a debt of gratitude to you for basically being the inspiration that got this meeting happening, and I'm very glad that we've run it. You've got the final word, Annette, before I wrap the thing up. Annette, back to you. Thank you. Take yourself off mute first, though. Thank you. You've done it. Good job. Thanks.
Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who's spoken. It hasn't been easy, and everybody who's attended. What I would like to say, it is very, very disappointing and very obvious that we have an issue when none of the regulatory bodies have joined.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to get our issues out there if they're not going to listen to us? I would plead with any of our media people to highlight and talk about the meeting and highlight that they were invited and did not join. And some didn't even have the decency to decline. But thank you. I'm pleased it's gone so well. But the one thing I will say that has happened from one regulatory body is that they have offered to have a meeting with us. And that is good news. And that is the SRA. They've offered to have a meeting with us. But the legal ombudsman, they didn't even bother to respond. And that is not good for the people of England and Wales. Scotland, it might not be brilliant, but at least you've got people who respond. And the SLCC, from people I've spoken to, have had good vibes. They've said they've been very helpful. But thank you, everybody. And if you know anybody who's got a problem in this, just please send them on to the Facebook page until there's other people out there who can help.
Annette, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to bring the session to a close by repeating what I said earlier about, I spoke about the fire triangle. You need heat, fuel, and oxygen. You can't have a fire without that. As you may recall from what I said earlier, in this space, you need a really good argument, i.e. you're able to articulate why something's wrong or unfair and needs to be changed. The second thing you definitely need is politicians supporting you and being on side. We've all got MPs. We all live in a parliamentary democracy. Your MP should be helping in some way, shape or form. So engage with your MP and get them involved. We have an all-party parliamentary group for that very reason. And the third thing we want and need is media coverage. Now, on the media coverage side, we've had loads and loads of media activity covering all kinds of different things. I'm just going to show you something just very, very quickly. So we were part of a 1-hour BBC Panorama documentary about something called the £1 billion savings scandal. I'm just going to put a link to this in the chat. I'm not going to play any of it now. It'll take too long. But basically, Annette is absolutely right when she talks about the importance of basically getting the media on side and the media playing their part. It was quite a result for us getting involved with the BBC Panorama documentary. We were ever so pleased about it. Maybe what we've been discussing tonight is the kind of thing that could find itself onto some kind of investigation, as Stuart was saying earlier, and maybe even onto some kind of panorama type program or the equivalents on Channel 4 or ITV, etc., etc., etc. No doubt about it. Firms, especially big ones, don't like the reputational damage that comes with that kind of thing, and we really do know it can work. If there's anybody here who's itching to say something, please whack it on the Facebook group, whack it on the chat. We will bring it to a close. We run over by 15 minutes. That's my fault. I haven't managed the time that well. But frankly, I don't think we've heard anybody say anything tonight that hasn't been worth listening to. So I'm in a way pleased that we've allowed the time to run over, okay? We've got to bring it to a close here, so otherwise we'll run over too much. But encourage Annette to persuade me to run another one of these meetings, and I'll happily listen to Annette. She's been a pleasure to work with over the last few months. Thanks. Well done, everybody. Good night, and I'm going to go and have my tea. Thank you. Good night, good night, good night. Cheers.